is dig in and find yourself 4 straws.
Okay.
That's it. So what I'll do is I'll take the straw off the table out of the way then, once you've got your 4. Don't worry too much about matching them in length. Matching them in thickness is probably more important too, but for your first time, all I really want you to get is the method. The neatness comes with practice.
Okay.
So have you got 4? 4 each? All right, so I'm going to take this down out of the way just so you've got some space to work. And what I want you to do is lay your straws down on the table so the ears are facing you like this. Okay? And if you get your piece of string then and put it underneath the 4 straws, it's just the easiest way in tying them up. Now if you look closely at the ears, there's a spot just here. This is the first node of growth. Everything that's this side of that is really tough and it doesn't bend very well. Everything that's the straw side of that is really easy to bend, and that's what we need. So your knot has to be the straw side of that first growth node there. So what I want you to do now is put a loose knot onto your string first. Just a very loose knot that brings all 4 straws together. That's it. Now, once you've that done, line up all of your growth nodes so they're roughly in the same spot. And then we're going to test your knot tying skills. Right, I'll hold that. Now, you tie your knot. Come down nearly to my fingers if you can with the knot. And you need to pull this really tight. So this is as tight as you can pull it. Don't worry, you will not break. If I can't break the string, you guys won't break the string.
Okay.
That's it. And we're going to double knot this. So you want to pull good and tight as you can, tighter than that. That's it now, and put a second knot into it. And the reason we're tying this so tight now is because the straw is soaked and wet, and so it's swelled up a little bit. When it dries out, it's going to shrink, and if the knot isn't tight enough, the whole thing could unravel a bit. Now, here's where the fun starts. So I would, if I were you, pull your chair back a little bit from the table. This will give you some room. As I say when I'm teaching this to a big class full of people, the only time at which you guys have gone wrong is if you end up with your neighbour's eyeball in the end of one of the straws. Everything else I can fix, okay? So don't worry about it. So I'm going to borrow yours for a second to show you what to do. Do you want to take yours up? So bend 1 straw towards you, 1 away from you, 1 out to the left, and 1 out to the right. Now the trick here is to bend the straw where you want and not where it wants. Sometimes you'll go to bend it and it'll bend randomly like ½ an inch away from where you're trying to bend it. So once it's folded, okay, the one that's closest to you, push it up. The one that's up, bring it down. The one on the left, bring it over. And the one on the right, bring it back. As I say, it's very easy for me to say all you have to do is.
Yeah.
Okay. Ready?
Yeah.
So the one that's closest to you goes up. The one that's up there comes down. The one on the left goes over. And the one on the right goes back. Okay. So what's going to happen next?
Then put that one there.
Up.
Back.
Down.
And that one
Over.
there. And then that one.
As I say, it's very easy for me to say all you have to do is.
Yeah.
So what I might do, since you're both working away happily, I might tell you a little bit about why they were made.
Okay.
So, as I mentioned a little bit earlier on, the time that we're talking about here is from the middle of the 19th century up to the middle of the 20th century. That's when our collection here at the museum, that's what it focuses on. And around that time, the harvest was all done by hand. All farming was done by hand. That's where the Irish summer holidays come from, the school holidays. Kids used to be given time off at this time of the year because it was a really busy time in the farm. There's a lot of work to be done. So when it came towards the end of this harvest time, the last and the biggest job to be done was to bring in the grain harvest. So it would be right kind of the middle of August, right up into the first couple of weeks in September. So we're heading really into harvest time now. So the whole community would get together in what was called a mehel. You ever heard the word mehel before?
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah, so a mehel is a group of people brought together to do a job of work. It doesn't matter what the job is, it's a job of work. So the mehel would get together, the whole community, and they'd bring in the harvest. And as a thank you, the farmers would put on the harvest dance. So this is where the harvest knots come in. What generally would happen, traditionally they were made by boys for girls as a token of love or friendship. Now, they would make 2 harvest knots. So I'll show you the one that we made earlier on. This is actually a female harvest knot because it has the ears left on. The male knot would have them cut off. So what the boy will do is he'll make 2 identical knots. They'll be identical in every way, except one will be a male knot and the other will be a female. The female knot he'll give to a girl that he fancies. The male knot he will keep himself, and he'll wear it maybe in the band of his cap or on the lapel of his jacket, and off he goes to the harvest dance. Now, as I'm sure you can imagine, some girls might get 4 or 5 of these things. And what they would do over the course of the harvest dance, they would dance with each boy who had given them a harvest knot. And if she didn't like him as much as he liked her, she'd very politely give him back the harvest knot. That was it. Enough said, problem solved. Yeah, I know. Difficult days. But if she kept one harvest knot at the end of the dance, then she would be stepping out with that boy, which of course in them days was much more serious than it would be considered today. So I suppose you could look on these as an old-fashioned engagement ring. I don't think you get away with it today somehow. But that's where the tradition comes from. Now, they were used at other times of the year. So harvest knots similar to these were used during the hiring fairs. Now, hiring fairs were generally earlier in the year, so they'd be around May time. And the idea was hundreds of local girls and boys would go to the local fair and they would make a harvest knot. And so say you were a shepherd, you'd put a piece of wool through the harvest knot and you'd wear it on your lapel. And that way, if someone was going around looking for shepherds, he didn't have to talk to everyone. All he had to do was look at what harvest knot they were wearing. Oh, he's a shepherd, or she's a shepherd, I can talk to them. If you were a seamstress, you might put a little piece of your stitch work on it. Whatever it was you happened to be skilled at. And so it sped up the whole process of the hiring fair. They were also used as part of the matchmakers fairs. So boys would wear them again to show off their skills. Because of course the more straw that was used and the more elaborate the harvest knot, you were saying, well, I'm wealthy because I can use up loads of straw and I'm really good with my hands. I'm a handy kind of a guy. I'd be good to have around the house. I wouldn't be an annoyance. So that's where the tradition of the harvest knot comes from. It's not really a west of Ireland tradition. We don't have a huge tradition of growing grain in this part of the country. Oats is about the only thing that will survive in the west coast. But as you go further east, this becomes much more common as you get into the better land of the east, and particularly the southeast around Wicklow and Wexford, that part of the country where there's better growing for wheat in particular. Wheat is a very fussy kind of a grain. It has to be very specific soil and very specific weather, much warmer than we get up here. So that's where the tradition of the harvest knot comes from. How are you guys getting on? You're very nearly finished.
Yeah.
Yeah, and how are you doing?